I've just clicked record there for you, Amber.
Oh, have you? Brilliant. Thanks very much, Joe. So welcome everyone to our fourth session of Conversation Cafe. We have our guest speaker Susan Shea that has joined us. Susan will be talking about the Montessori philosophy, looking into sense of order. Susan's actually worked in a variety of different places, including the EU, North America, and currently, as she's told us at the beginning there, she's working in Austria at the moment. Susan's also the founder of Phonetic Planet and is, of course, a certified Montessori guide. So I will pass it over to Susan. But before we get started, just to let you know that we are recording, it is confidential. So please ensure that confidentiality of all children and yourself, as well as your workplace, is maintained. So over to yourself, Susan.
Thank you, Ambreen. And please feel free, it is a conversation. So I'm also really eager to hear what you have to say. And I'm not sure if there's a protocol for that, but I'll keep my eyes on Ambreen and she can feel free to stop me at any time because I'm happy to let other people share in the conversation. I think that's really important, and that no matter how long we've worked in anything, we can learn new things from speaking to new people who are working in different situations, So hello, everybody. My name is Susan Shea, and I would like to, maybe you've heard a little about me from Ambreen, so enough about that, but I would like to just give you a brief overview of Maria Montessori. She comes up a lot in books or movies, and it's always a very old picture, or usually, and she's wearing something like out of Bridgerton or Downton Abbey. It's all very old style and old fashioned, and sometimes people associate her with ideas that they're kind of quaint and they're very good, but they're not really modern and they're not suitable for today's world. And, that was all fine 100 years ago when she lived. She was actually born in 1870. And so her ideas at that time were extremely radical because, for one thing, she believed that we should actually respect children. And, we're talking about a time when most children didn't eat dinner in the same room as their parents, so she got into a lot of trouble for that. And I do like to remind people and myself that actually she was a very realistic person. So when people say to me frequently, "Oh, you work in those schools? Yeah, where all the children, they're so quiet. And, that's not really how the real world works." I think to myself, well, she was a lady who went to med school. She was the first medically qualified doctor in Italy to be a woman. And so in order for her to do this, they weren't very excited about admitting her. They weren't under pressure to include women or whatever. And so she actually had to do a lot of her classes at nighttime, including going in and observing cadavers and, learning anatomy in that way all by herself. And so I figured she was a pretty tough lady if she had to go back into the medical building at nighttime all by herself and not feel overwhelmed by that. So I like to think she was actually pretty realistic. Her ideas theoretically have stood the test of time, and so nowadays they come up under other headings and descriptions. And I also think she'd be okay with that because during her research as a doctor, she decided to observe children, and she was observing them as a doctor. So every note that she took, she was really making biological observations. And she spoke many times about the fact that this method that was attributed to her it's not a thing she invented. It's not her method, even though it's still described as such. She's just writing about people and what people do and how we all come into this world and are wired. And I think she'd be very open to see that many other philosophies maybe cross over in some of these ideas. I also think that there's plenty of, she took some ideas from other people, and so she didn't feel like she was stealing. She's looking into a collaborative type of learning like we are today, having a conversation. And so she didn't claim to own anything. The materials in Montessori schools are not trademarked or patented, and you know, some people get bothered about that, but I actually think that's because this can be applicable to everybody, and we choose to use what we would like to, and some of us like a lot of it and some of us don't. So in her notes on very, very young children, she decided to categorize what she saw. So she saw 5 distinctive patterns that are common in every child up until about the age of 5.5. And those are, the first one was the absorbent mind. How can a kid learn stuff way easier than we can? How can they learn a language? How can they remember the name of the giraffe at the zoo? You know, I live down the street from Schönbrunn Zoo, and I see children taking in all sorts of information there, and we can't. You know, how did they remember their phone number? And I can't, you know, it's plugged into my phone. So children learn by absorbing rather than consciously learning, because the ability to learn consciously only begins when we are around 6 years of age. And so the other 4 traits are a sensitive period for movement. We all know how much children love to move. And of course, school used to be sit down and don't move all day. So most philosophies have thrown that out the window, and that's because children are born to move. They learn when they're moving, and information is absorbed much quicker when they're allowed to do that. A sensitive period for language. A child can learn many languages at the first stage of childhood, and I've struggled to learn German in my 6 years here. I still don't really have very much, and I watch many children come into my school in Vienna from other countries. Maybe they're here because their parents are working in the diplomatic service, and within maybe 5 months, they have so much more German than I can accumulate even after 6 years, you know, so that's related to the absorbent mind, I think. Small children love tiny things, so they're always collecting stuff. Sometimes the stuff isn't very nice, and they're not the kind of things we'd like to find in their pocket, but they do love little stones and shells and all sorts of pretty things, and sometimes even simple things like acorns. And that's why a lot of our schools now are equipped with little things, because children love to hold them in their hands. And the last one, which is the one we're going to have a chat about, is the sensitive period for order. So I explained to somebody who does not work in education the title or the slant of this, and they said, "Oh, you mean like discipline?" And I said, "No, this is not order like we grew up with, yeah, like traditional school, but it's a recognition that a child's mind is actually ready to appreciate order, and that is nothing to do with enforced discipline, but it's rather an appreciation for behaviors and practices that make sense. Because as we all know, a child is still trying to figure out what's going on here. You know, I just arrived a couple of years ago, and I'm still not understanding everything, and I have to really try and take a lot in. So the appreciation for order is going to really facilitate that. And I did write a couple of notes. So I have a little granddaughter. She's 17 months old. She lives 2 doors away from me. And every afternoon, no matter what's going on, she goes to her door, sometimes with only her boots on, and sometimes with some other clothes on, and she'll call my name and she's coming up the street because that's what her day is. That's her routine. She's coming up to see me. And she came in yesterday, and my husband was, had a bad day on the computer, so he had taken his glasses off. And as soon as she saw him, she was like, she's directing him because, of course, he doesn't function without his glasses. To her, he's the guy with the glasses, and the fact he has them in his hand kind of throws her off a bit, So, some people look at behaviors like this and think, oh, that kid's so bossy or whatever. But it's really a manifestation of something's out of line with what I expect it to be. Yeah. And so she didn't protest about that, but it certainly was jarring to her for a minute. She's at a point where she loves a scripted conversation. So it could be a pretty familiar conversation when she comes up the stairwell in my building. She calls my name, and it's like a routine for her, and then she'll come in and she'll say, big step, because she's crossing over the threshold. And then my little dachshund will run up and she'll say, no, stay, sit. She has all this, and it's part, even if the dog doesn't come running, she's kind of ready, when it does show up, she's ready to do all about this. So I was thinking about that just in everyday life. And, I thought, well, what are the other things? Hopefully some of you guys can think. I thought of a child, for example, laying on the floor at home or at school, lining up toys. The way sometimes you got a big box of cars, but then you look over and the cars are all lined up, or the farm animals or whatever. So I don't know if anybody has some ideas of things that happen in their home or in their school that it kind of speaks to that, and maybe has a similar visual to go with it. You can think about that, and like I said, I'll keep watching Ambreen. Anytime you want to add something, that's okay. I had a nephew. He's now a grown man, but he grew up on a farm, and every evening, my sister and her husband, they would pull the big table away from the wall because they needed the space so they could all sit around the table. And every evening when this table was moved away, this little boy would just cry and cry because the table was now not in its proper space, and sometimes we can overlook a thing like that and go, what is wrong with it? Like, what's going on? But as soon as the meal was finished and the table was moved back to the wall, it's like everything was fine again, So these things aren't so intense that they begin to cripple us as humans and we become really dependent on them. But I'm just using those examples to show you how observant a child is. And like I say, they're trying to make sense of a wider environment. And so predictability is like really, really important. And even when we think, oh, come on, you have to be a bit flexible. I mean, we adults aren't as flexible as we'd like to think we are either, So these are just very basic ways that children like to do that. Perhaps you would like to show us photo number 1, Ambreen. Let's have a look. See what's going to show up here. There it is. There's the booth. So I have at the end of the talk a little picture of my hallway. There's the toys, yeah. We see a lot of this in preschools, no matter what kind of school, right? and in our home. And so they happen sometimes even with everyday objects. It doesn't have to be toys. It might be tin cans or boxes of cornflakes or whatever, but things tend to get lined up a lot in a child's world. And that makes sense to them. So let's move to photo 2. And then next, yeah, there we go. So this is another child who likes to line things up. And what you're looking at there, for anybody who's not familiar with Montessori, it's actually a concrete representation of a mathematical equation. So we don't teach that to the children or anything until they're much older. The child doing this is 4 years old, and we showed them how to do that, but typically we're going to show a child how to organize some components and then move away, because a child will actually cop on to that a lot faster if we get out of their way and let them explore that themselves. And so this equation, I do want to read it because I'm useless at mathematics. And even when I read it right now, I'm still like, wow, how can a child, So this equation is A plus B plus C, and that's in brackets, times 3 equals A cubed plus 3A2B plus 3A2B plus 6ABC plus 3C2A plus B3B cubed plus B2, I guess the 2 is squared, right? Plus 3C2B plus C cubed. I mean, it's pretty long. And by the time a child is 12 in the Montessori program, they're actually able to internalize that equation, but this piece of material goes through the entire system. So you're using it just as a plaything when you're 4, and you know it so intimately. There's 3 layers in that box, and they get higher and higher, so you're actually building it. And by the time you're 12, you can appreciate that little yellow cube, that's going to be A cubed right at the beginning, and you can relate that puzzle to everything by name, but like I said, for now it's just something to organize. Those pieces are put on the table by the child, and the child will naturally want to do something. And it's okay if they don't make that, by the way. It's not like there's a right way and a wrong way, but they will want to reproduce what they're looking at on the lid of the box. Eventually, doesn't have to be every time. So when I looked at that picture, I did make myself a note, and I said, in a well-organized, prepared classroom, we can capitalize on a child's natural ability to want to organize things by first decluttering our shelves in the classrooms, and if necessary, rotating the materials, because we have to keep them inviting for the child. So instead of having a shelf that's like jam-packed full of boxes that are all overflowing, we put a few things out, and then every so often we can rotate those. And that means that the child can see them better, they're more organized, and then they'll want to use something. And just like adults, when we want to do something, we can do it a lot faster and a lot better. We do stuff that we don't want to do all the time, but it's the same for a child. When they want to take something out, they're going to learn much faster. So to store toys or learning materials in a chaotic way can make them more functional for adults, perhaps. I could get big boxes and line them up there from IKEA. It's down the street. I could jam as much as I want onto that shelf, but that would be less attractive for the children. And so that's a major reason that, it's like the saying, less is more. It's actually visually appealing to a child when they can just see a small number of pretty things on a shelf, as opposed to 100 baskets that are all full of chaos, you know. Let's look at photo 3. Green, please. Yes. So here we are at lunch. And I picked this photo because I thought, you know, food is such a thing in every care center, in every early childhood program, and even in every house. You know, it's a source of argument sometimes, no matter what age the children are. Food is such a huge feature in our lives, and I wanted to get a little look there at that plate because lots of parents, we instinctively arrange food on a little child's plate in an organized manner. Like we kind of do put all the crackers over on one side and slice up the little tomatoes to make them pretty. And then we kind of segregate them. And for some reason, we seem to know that that's going to help. That's going to make the child maybe want to take something and eat it, because nobody wants to try and make a child feel forced into eating. But the slow vibe, you know, I was looking at this kind of picture and thinking, this is like living in the moment, you know, sitting back and instead of spooning everything into the child, letting them take their time to proceed through a plate. Because when we go to a fancy restaurant and our food is presented beautifully, like we enjoy it a lot more and we pay an awful lot more for food, even just by how it looks, you know. We decide on which place we're going for dinner sometimes by looking at the website. Ooh, look at that. That looks good. That looks good. I'm going to eat it, you know. So the same for children. We tend to instinctively appeal to their sense of order when we arrange their food. And if we don't think about it, I guess that is a thing to maybe think about in the future. How do we want that food? I mean, she's had a little, you know, time to smudge it around there on the plate, but it is something that I think we give a lot of time to organizing that and maybe not to other things. So we can do this if we put our mind to it. Yeah. Let's look at picture 4, please. Okay. So here's a little shelf. Now, before this existed, you know, there was a shelf in a cupboard with bags of these diapers, and you know, it was bulging because when you have a new baby, you feel very overwhelmed and you're like, I'll never have enough this or that, and I can't get enough sleep, and I got to be prepared. I got to have all the bottles and all the diapers ready. But over time, when we learn how to pace ourselves, you know, we figured that the child can, at a certain age, this picture was taken when the child in the picture was maybe 12 months old. And so now this child is learning to participate in, you know, one of the basics of personal hygiene. So we got this little shelf, and there's the box on the top has a change of clothes. So it's only going to have 2 shirts on one side and 2 pairs of pants on the other. Because when you want a pair of pants, maybe you take the 2 and you say, would you like this one or this one? That's giving the child a sense of autonomy. When you open a little closet and there's 54 pairs of pants, and you're like, which one would you like? You know, that's really hard for a toddler. And sometimes they'll take the one that's 3 years too old and too big, but you had nowhere to put that. So you threw it in there. Now you've got to say, no, but you can't have that one, you know. So this is a kind of a Marie Kondo picture. This makes sense to a toddler, yeah, because they're looking. And I see here we've just got three diapers there on the bottom. Of course, they're all the same, but the toddler gets to pick. I'd like to pick that one there in the middle. there's no difference, and she can bring it over, and the wipes are there, and all of this is setting up a sense of expectation in a toddler. So instead of, running and grabbing the baby and saying, look, you stink, I got to take care of this, we have to do something that's a little bit more child friendly and evoking a sense of respect, because this is a person and nobody wants to be grabbed and wiped down in a dash. They want to participate in this, and the respect that we give at an early age becomes part of the order. So this person actually absorbs the fact that I'm being included and respected, and their behavior evolves accordingly. This becomes part of the routine. This is actually a calm process. I don't need to scream. I don't have to wriggle under my mom's arm or my grandma or my teacher, because I can walk over there and I can take the one I want and I can come back. And that alone actually is successful in helping a child to be less resistant, because as we know, hardly any child really wants to have this job done. Most of the time it becomes a chase, So we want to give some incentives to create a sense of calm and organization and predictability about that. And the child can see them, so they're not in a drawer. They're out on a little shelf. The child can feel secure in the knowledge that they know where they are, because what happened with this toddler is, she began to feel that things were happening and now she needed a new diaper. So then they can come and bring it to you, and now you don't have to be, the bad guy who chases them around all the time. Some of the time, this can be initiated by the child. So this is it's very focused on dignity, on personal dignity. And again, this can become part of the order that the child, this is how the world works. I'm valued, I'm respected. I know I'm really small and that person's much taller, but I can feel secure in a situation like this. Yeah. How about number 5, Ambreen? Yeah. Bedtime. There we go. Okay, so organization and order are also provided for in a daily routine. And of course, in this day and age, we would be like, well, who doesn't know this? I mean, come on, everyone needs a routine. We need it for ourselves, or we can't run a house, run a job. We can't do this. And many people, as I still discover after over 25 years in working with young children, they haven't realized this yet. So they become very stressed, and they blame themselves for when things go wrong in the home. And sometimes it's actually a simple fix, a basic structure that can appeal to a family's sense of order is, of course, a routine. And it has to start from the beginning, because a young child's comprehension is often underestimated, and because they're also experiencing a sensitive period towards language, some of these things overlap. So while the routines are starting, even from babyhood, we need to talk about them. Oh, now we're getting our pajamas on. I mean, I'm talking to a 6-week-old baby, right? But by the child's order is like, every time we name things and label them, this is adding to how secure I'm going to feel. That's pajamas. That word means this. This is going to happen. And next, we're going to read a book. And so over time, by using a simple script, we begin to follow into a routine. Number 6. Yeah. Okay. So there's a book. It's not a plug. I just did use the Phonetic Planet book, but it can be any book, yeah. So we all know that young children can have a shelf full of books. And in a school, it's really tempting to go and put 6 full shelves of books, and the next thing you know, children are pulling them off the shelves and maybe getting in an argument over a book, or some children never go over there at all, and it's pretty disorganized. So adults don't have the patience for how a child can mess up a situation with too much clutter, you know, because if you see it, a bookshelf and it has 50 books on it, any 16-month-old or even 3-year-old will have a very nice time taking all those books off the shelf just for the process. I'm going to just keep doing this. I'll take them all off. I'll take them all off. You know what? I'm really tired. I can't put them all back. And so adults get frazzled over this. So a very easy fix for this is to pick about 10 or 12 books. And you don't have to slide them in on the shelf. You can actually open them, you know, like so on the shelf with the cover, so the child can see them from the front. They make lots of really cool shelves now. Some of them are made like from fabric that you can actually slide the book down like a bag, you know, and the front is still visible. And so, you know, I get parents who say, that's a great idea, Susan. This is sounding like expensive. You know, I can't go home and just start investing in new furniture. And honestly, if you put the money into the organizational part, you don't need 50 books already, because you can exist very peacefully with the 2-year-old with 10 books. Because their sense of order means they probably have 2 that they really like, and then they keep wanting to read it on Monday night and Tuesday night, and by Friday night, maybe you're like, could we not just read something else? But this is the sense of order, you know, so it's actually much more efficient for the family as a whole if you can think about how you want to store things and display things and have them available, so that there's less arguments and more enjoyment. And then you actually need less stuff. The last, or actually photo 7, please, Ambreen. This is a great book while we're talking about reading. It's called The Montessori Toddler, and it's by Simone Davis. And it's a great read. You can learn a lot about toddlers, but actually the concepts, because in the Montessori philosophy, many of the characteristics that begin in babyhood and toddlerhood actually extend through the first 6 years of life. So we see the roots of what become very obvious characteristics around 3, 4, and 5. They're actually emerging during toddlerhood. So it's no harm to see how soon these begin to manifest and how we can then see them bearing fruit when the child gets a little bit older. And the good news is that in case you were fearful as a mom or a dad that, you know, my kid is going to be neurotic, like, why do we always have to read that book? And why do we always have to cut up my food and say this? It changes, you know. Anybody who's a parent knows this. As soon as we feel on top of something and we have something all sussed out, the child changes all the time. That's good. Change is good. We are evolving. So around about 5.5, you're going to walk in someday and your child puts on their shoes, but the laces are open. And what's worse, they want them open. Even though they learned how to tie their lace when they were 5, now it's not something that looks good to them. Yeah, so you're going to see a little bit more disheveled in a sense of personal appearance, personal hygiene, a care of routine. Sometimes a child actually becomes very forgetful for a while they're transitioning into the next developmental phase. And all of this is part of a healthy, continual cycle of development. So that's the good news, that capitalize on this while you can, because it doesn't last forever. And if you can really answer this need in a young child during that formative period, okay, it's gone for a while, but it does come back. So you're going to get a teenager who's a little more organized than their friends, because somewhere back here, they're used to this, yeah? So the last photo, and then we'll be able to have, I think, more of a chat about this. There is my hallway, and there's my granddaughter's boots, who moved my boots. You know, when she comes in, this little bucket is there for her, and she can, if she wants, she can sit. She used to sit on that little mat while she took off her boots and then place her boots in the bucket. But now I actually have a chair, because she's a little older and more sophisticated, being 17 months now. So we bought a little teeny tiny chair, and she can sit on the chair and pull her boots off. And similarly, when she's going home, you know, she can put them on. And we have a little pair of inside shoes. It's a very Austrian thing. I don't know if other cultures have this. Like, I didn't experience this growing up in Ireland, but sometimes in the States in school, we certainly had inside shoes, but in a big city where most people live in apartments in really old buildings, I guess they all have these little slippers, you know, so she'll switch. And this is all part, I don't even have to, you know, we support her if we have to kind of line up the snowsuit so she can sit down in it, but she puts her own legs in, and she puts her own feet into the boots, and this are little pegs that we hung up low down. You know, we have big wardrobes on the other side of that hallway, but it's really important to think about, you know, it would have been a lot less bother to just hang that up in a hanger in our own wardrobe. But that deprives the child of independence for a start. And also, you know, my wardrobe isn't as orderly as what I like to prepare for the child, because, you know, I'll have to deal with the mess if I need to. But it's in respect for her, really, that this is what she's looking for right now. In her own home, there would be the same amount, you know, of knobs, and for a child, modern children, you know, they have sometimes 5 or 6 jackets. That can be a little confusing. So you just hang up 2 or 3. And so it's raining today. Would you like your raincoat or your snowsuit? And you got to be prepared to work with, you know, what they pick, because you offered the choice. Yeah. And sometimes that calls to us to be a little prepared. Like, the adult has to be prepared all the time. If you look outside and see it snowing, well, one of the choices has to be the snowsuit, or else, you know, you're going to get soaked when you go outside. So that's kind of what I was hoping to share with you today. It's like a place for everything, and everything in its place. And it's just a little thought to give you. I'd love to hear, for example, what kinds of things do you do in your classrooms? Maybe you've got some really cool storage ideas. Every time I move to a new classroom, you know, I think I know everything. And I'm like, wow, that is a great idea. You know, so in my current classroom, I also see, wow, that's how they organize that. You know, never thought of that. So perhaps in your home or in your classroom, you have strategies that you'd feel comfortable sharing with others. But thanks for listening to my blurb, and you know, hopefully we can exchange some thoughts.
That was great, Susan. Thank you so much. That was really good information in relation to each stage and everything else for the sense of order that you talked about. One of my questions was, though, in relation to those children that perhaps don't get the opportunity to have routines and they don't sort of get those routines in the home environment, or they might be different each time. How would that sort of be facilitated?
That's a great question. One of my former places of employment was in a very underserved community, and the children there, many of them were dealing with trauma on a daily basis, actually. And so the interesting part about caregivers or school care providers is that when you can prepare your space of learning or of care where the child's going to spend their day, they actually are so relieved to experience this because it becomes a type of a sanctuary. And so frequently, those children demonstrate through what we see that they become the most adhering to this because it is at one stable place that they know they can get it. So they actually, I'm thinking when I explained to somebody where I was going to work at that time, they're like, oh, but you'll have to be a lot stricter than, I used to work in a small, tiny country school. And that was not at all the case. And I was curious, but I was happy to feel like this was not an issue because the child had this need. The need couldn't be answered. We can't blame parents. People are living under very different situations, and so some children, as you said, they cannot be given this kind of opportunity. But when they realize that there is a place that can provide this, it actually relaxes them so much that you find yourself more often than not sitting having a parent-teacher meeting, and you're describing the child and the parents are like, wow, it's like a different kid. He's not like that at home. And of course, we want to support adults. It's an equal part of our work. If we're realistic, we're really coaching the parents as well as helping the children, so we have to be mindful of that some people, their own lives are not orderly, and so how can they do this? We have to tailor. Maybe we offer one suggestion. I could read a litany of things, but that's not going to help somebody in need. So we pick one thing and maybe we just show them what that looks like. So for example, the little bucket with the boots, because some kids go home and I did it myself. I think your natural instinct is to go woo and kick your foot in the air when you're 4, and watch your boot. It's going to go way up in the, so like even a child can do this, yeah, and then they can go pick up the boot and put it in the bucket. And so when they're getting ready to go to school or go wherever the next day, we don't have to go searching for the boot because hardly any family is actually relaxed at the beginning of the day when you're trying to get out the door. That's when a lot of issues start, yeah. And so we used to advise a parent who had a stressful beginning, have the child help you pick their outfit when they're going to bed so that the outfit's next to the bed. And when they wake up the next day, that pressure is off. Now we don't have to go find this, go find that. That's dirt. It's all gone because the outfit is all ready. It's waiting for them. And even a small suggestion like that, if you can connect with the parent and begin to win their confidence, they will come back looking for more help. If they feel you're judging them, they're not going to come because many parents are defensive. They think we want to be experts and tell them all off, and that's not what we're really doing. We want to help the family, you know, it helps everybody, doesn't it, when we can do that. So that's a really good question.
Would anybody else like to ask any questions or add anything to the discussion at all? You can even share your experiences.
Yeah, I'd really like to know some of how you organize your space. You know, some of you have good plans in your own space. I think that would be really nice to hear.
I think we have within our establishment ourselves for students, in order to ensure that we're supporting them, we actually have our PEEP sessions, and through that students learn about resources, what resources they should be using, and what would be good for children. And you know, it was talking about what types of resources we would have, and for them to put them back and have all that sense of what they're involving in and getting in you know, that experience from, you know, but it's also in relation to ensuring that they're involved in the actual development of it as well, so it gives them that sense of empowerment.
Yes, yeah, we all like it. You know, it's not even just the kids, right? That we all like to feel that we're participating in something, and especially when we're learning from you know, when we're attending a course, we also want to know that that's organized, you know, and that there's nothing worse than signing up for something and then discovering like these people don't know what they're doing. So it's important at every level, isn't it? That and the child is somewhat like that, because when a child comes to school and the adults aren't really focused on what they're doing because they aren't organized. I mean, the child can see this, you know, the child is so able to pick up our vibe as an adult. So when we're stressed or when we are angry or nervous or any of these things, especially, you know, the pandemic has been so difficult for many people. And this is why I feel incredibly privileged that for a lot of the time we didn't have to really adapt. I cannot imagine how stressful it has been for people who, you know, have to wear masks all day or have to take children in shifts or have to have some children at home and some children at school and tailor, you know, this is a really stressful time. So it's been very challenging. How do you become organized in this space, you know, and what can you do? Because the children know this, you know, and, you know, a teenager knows, and they have a different way of dealing with an adult when they feel, you know, they sense vulnerability. But a little child can actually feel very insecure when they sense that the adult isn't organized.
Absolutely. We have a question, Margaret.
Hi there. Just to say, when I worked in an ESN school, I worked a lot with the primary ones, and because the class only takes up to 10 pupils, we had, for the kids, their routine in the morning would be to come in, and they all had their own wee peg, and their names were on their peg, and the wee box sitting on a bench, and their peg was obviously for their jacket. In their bag, and the wee box was to put any whaley boots or anything in it, or it also kept their whaley boots in for outdoor play in the wet days. And we also had like a wee snack box in the class for their morning snack and drink, and their lunch packs. And the kids knew to do this, and they were all obviously had visuals on them as well. So for kids that maybe were non-verbal, or like kids that were like, obviously you had autistic kids, non-verbal, kids who struggled with sight, all different things. So just getting the kids from the beginning into that routine, they knew exactly what they were doing every day, and the visual learning, like it was had a big impact on them. And it's true what you say. For kids that maybe haven't got that at home, it does make them feel so much more comfortable and confident and relaxed within that space. And it makes it more enjoyable for them. And you see them coming out like the wee shell that they're maybe in. And it's just so beneficial for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good for them to have that sense of routine, so that they do feel it's familiar. Linda, you've got a question?
Not a question, just provoking thought here, Susan. You when you were talking about just children and how they like order, and sometimes you would expect children, I'm talking about my own children here, not children that I've worked with, my own children, you would expect them to go with, so the two grandparents are completely different. My mum is so organised, likes everything, oh, there's my light now, likes everything to be in its place, has a routine, the kids know how to behave in our house, what to do, etc. And my husband's mum is, they do what they like. But actually, if you were to ask them what grandparent they wanted to go to, it's always my mum, because they like that routine, they like that order of Gran's house. And it's funny because sometimes as adults you would think they're going to go with their Granny Margaret because she lets them do whatever they like, but they don't. They always pick my mum, who has that routine all the time.
That's a really cool thing, because this thing, like, they know the parameters, you know, they know where the limits are. And you know, a child who comes even into a school where they are let do what they want, even from well-meaning parents, you know, this insecurity makes them uneasy. So yes, what you're saying about your children, it's spot on, isn't it? Because there's something nice about knowing I could probably predict how this is going to go today when I go to this house, you know? Yeah. It's very reassuring.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
And we've got some in the comments, people just saying, Sandra's just saying about information, that it's nice to exchange information for our students for practice. And Laura was just mentioning about organisation, that actually it's great to take back to our own learning environments. And I think with all the information that you've actually shared, Susan, it's making us think about the environment that we're providing for students to then go forward and use that experience as practitioners. So it's really rethinking our own environment, and are we making it in a way that would be supporting children for their sense of routines and orders as well?
Yeah, you know, Maria Montessori, in one of her first classrooms, because she worked in a tenement house, and all the moms were cleaning ladies, like they had to go to work. And so she was maybe like a daycare, really, you know. And one of the very first things she did was she went out and had some people create for her the small chairs and tables, because of course nowadays this is like, well, we expect to see this in, you know, but the fact that like that she went to this trouble, because even to sit in a chair that is beyond your size does not feel organized and centered and comfortable, you know. So in every last way, and like I do want to say, we are all living in the real world, even though this magnificent classroom that I work in, you know, has tons of new ideas for me about organizing. No classroom or home, we can't be perfect. So we have to kind of forgive ourselves. Like I tell me this all the time, you know, while I'm, you know, creating more stuff at home to bring, like we can't be perfect, but it certainly gives us lots of ideas, and every community is different, and we have to just work with the cultures and the children, the age group. What would be very useful for the community that we are currently with, you know?
Yeah, great. And we've just got one last comment from Mandy saying that children like predictability. Of course, it helps them with their routines going forward. So that's us at 5 o'clock. So thank you so much for everybody that's joined us. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Susan. I myself personally feel I've learned so much from yourself in relation to routines in order as well. So thanks for coming along.
Thank you. And I hope to keep in touch. And
Absolutely.
I'll be one of the listeners in the next Conversation Cafe.